So by now we have a blank Django project so we can actually work inside of this. Now, of course, we're going to be doing only models related stuff, but in order for us to use models, we have to actually start an app to go ahead and do that. So opening up terminal, I have my virtual environment installed, activated, and I have everything set up related to Django. So if I pip freeze, I see that I've got my Django requirements here. So if I cd into source where the root of my Django project is, I'm going to go ahead and start a actual new Django app. So we'll do python manage.py start app, and for simplicity's purposes, I'm going to just call it blog. Now we do have an actual project that makes a blog, and that's try Django 1.9, which you can see on joincfe.com/YouTube. This is not based off of that. We are doing completely from scratch and not referencing that whatsoever. We're just going to be talking through this app as if it was a blog. All right. So now inside of our actual Sublime text, we're going to go in here inside of blog, and we're going to look at our models. It's the only thing we're working in. And the thought here is, what is it that makes up a blog? As in, what is the data that comes in and actually makes our blog real? Now, you can think about all the things that add to it or contribute to it, but the number one main thing is a blog post, right? Comments are additional, user login and log out. That might be something that we need, but it's definitely not required. That's also additional. What's really, really required is a post. So that's the first model that we're going to create is class post, and it's going to be models.model. Right? So models.model, what does that mean? That means we are writing a Python class that inherits everything from the Django models.model. Now you could import the model itself. So you could come in here and do from django.db.models, import model, and actually do this right here. It's the same thing. Now, if you're familiar with Python, you should know that, but if you don't, that's okay. That's all we're doing. So we're inheriting from the model class. And generally with Python, you capitalize the classes. Now, if you had, like, let's say, for instance, I wanted to call this post model, you absolutely could call it that, but you would want to follow this syntax. That is a capital P and a capital M to show the two different words that are in there. And we'll see how it's rendered. I'm going to leave it as post model so you can see how it's rendered in real time. So now that we've got this post model, we could just write pass here, and it's still a model, but there's really not a whole lot in this. Let's actually do this and see what happens. I'm going to go into the DJ mod, and I'll go into settings, and I have to add this installed app in, right? So hopefully you know this stuff. If you don't, Try Django series will help clarify those things. But let's close out of the settings, and we just added our app in so we can do python manage.py make migrations. And I press enter, and then I can do python manage.py migrate. Okay, so what happened here exactly? Make migrations and migrate. So these two calls, and I'll put them in here as notes, and that's python manage.py make migrations and python manage.py migrate. Now, make migrations, you have to do this every time you change models.py. So whatever you do in models.py, even if you're not sure you should do it, just do it. It's a really good practice to do this. Now, the reason this exists has to do with how the database changes. So when I ran migrate, that actually ran the database changes. Make migrations is basically setting up the database changes. Migrate actually runs them. Now, when I ran make migrations, I created a new file inside of this migrations folder, and that's this initial file. Notice what it made. All it made was a model and a field. It made one single field, and that is auto field. Auto field, otherwise known as the primary key, and it is the ID field, comes with every single model. That is, if we look at our code here, what happened when we inherited models, we basically said there's an ID field here, and it's models dot, well, let's actually get rid of this old syntax. We don't want to do models dot model like that. We're going to leave it as it starts. So models dot model, that's how we want to have it. So inside of models, it's model.auto field and primary key equals to true. This is in there by default. Another way to think about this is ID equals to models.integer field. And we would say primary key equals to true as well. But this auto increments. That is, the first one's going to be 1, the second one's going to be 2, third one's going to be 3, 4, and so on. It will be there until the end of days, right? So it will infinity auto increment. That's what this auto field does. But it only works with this primary key. I haven't seen the auto field work outside of being associated to the primary key. Now, what's the primary key? That is related to the database, basically allowing the database to know what is the specific item in here that is going to be the auto incremented ID that's directly correlated to how the database works. You don't have to know too much other than the fact that by default with models.model, with Django models, they have this auto field, this auto ID field, and it's actually really important because it's a way that you can always reference that particular item inside of the model. When I say that particular item, we'll see what I mean there in the future when we actually create stuff. But for right now, that's it. That's something that comes in there by default. And you're like, well, what's this models.integer field? How do I know what fields are and what fields I can use and all that? That is something we'll talk about in the next one. But for now, I have this model in here, and it was shown to us that it's in here. First of all, we made sure that the app was inside of installed apps. You definitely have to do that. And then we ran Makemigrations, which created this file, that auto field. Now, if this model did not inherit from the Django models, this would not show this, right? It would not be the same thing. And now that we have this, there's all these default things that are built into this model. So I can actually create this model in other ways. That's kind of the point. We'll see what I mean as we go forward in the series, how we create things with the model, but that's where we're going to leave it here for now. We created our first model and we talked about auto field. If you have any questions, let us know. Otherwise, let's keep going.